IVM.
Hey guys, welcome to Marbles Lost and Found. I'm Zain.
And I'm Avanti.
And today we'll be discussing a fairly important topic, I'd say, that I think a lot of people in some way or the other may deal with or relate to, is eating disorders and body image. Because I think, Avanti, what is your take on this? I feel like there's a lot, especially on social media now, a lot of pressure based on how we're supposed to look and how we're supposed to feel, and hashtag self-care, hashtag yoga, hashtag this, hashtag...
Oh, don't get me started on that f***ing yoga shit. Insta yogis.
Oh God, yes.
I can't.
And the amount of pressure that can be put on people for that. And so today we have a guest with us who's also a psychotherapist by trade, Ishita Pateria. Hi, Ishita.
Hi, Zain. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
And we're going to try and delve a little bit into eating disorders and body image, what that does for our self-esteem, what it means for us as people, and so on. So I think, let's just start a little bit more informative, I'd say. Ishita, what would you think?
What is your 101 on ED?
On eating disorders, yeah.
So I think the most common eating disorders that we see in general and also in India is anorexia and bulimia. Mm-hmm. So anorexia per se is when you start restricting yourself from eating or anything that gives you energy, really. So eating and drinking and anything sugary, anything at all. And you're kind of preoccupied with the aspect of gaining weight all the time. Mm-hmm. And you also sometimes see your body in a very different way to what it actually looks like. So much of the time is actually spent on how you're not going to eat or how you're going to do other things. And in doing that, many times, you can even start becoming a perfectionist in other parts of your life. Mm-hmm. But the main thing is with the preoccupation of not eating and with weight gain.
Okay.
Bulimia, on the other hand, is when you either binge and then you purge, mm-hmm. or you purge in general. And
by purging, you mean vomiting?
Yes.
Okay.
And or sometimes people even take laxatives and stuff like that.
Right.
So either way, but it has to come out of your body. And for bulimia, many people, what they don't realize is that you may actually not lose as much weight because at the end of the day, your body is still digesting some of the food that you've eaten. Mm. But what it actually does is that it messes up with your esophagus because it actually starts scaling it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And
because
that
of all the
causes,
acid that's in your stomach that's constantly coming up.
And your liver and your kidneys.
Yeah.
Right. And so now, as a general overview, are there any sort of preconceptions or ideas that people have about eating disorders here? What do you feel is something that people have the wrong idea about generally? What are the trends you've sort of seen, be it, around you or maybe
So
with
I
some
think
clients?
for a lot of people only notice that you're suffering from an eating disorder if you've gone under a certain amount of weight. Mm-hmm. But actually it depends on how much weight you have lost. So for example, if someone is quite large and if they've still unhealthily lost that weight, they could still be suffering from an eating disorder, even though technically on your BMI you're a normal weight.
Right.
But and many people think that only when you're looking really skinny, that's when there's a problem.
Right.
But it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And something which is really serious is that most people who suffer from an eating disorder, it's very hard to actually get cured. Because most people only go get help when it's really severe.
Okay.
Because normally if you're dieting or if you're looking better, it's encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then when you're encouraged for that long and then suddenly somebody comes and tells you now stop, it's not so easy.
Exactly. So to that end, that was my next question. So what do you say to the people who would, if they notice someone who may be losing weight in an unhealthy way, and they just say, man, just stop doing this to yourself. What's wrong with you? What is the general response that, if someone does have an eating disorder, what would they typically respond to that with? And what would you say is a better way to approach someone who may have an eating disorder?
So most people would be straight up denial. They would they would make up excuses. They would say we're eating healthy, we're watching what we eat, we're not just eating junk. Any excuse that or we've already eaten. There are many ways of doing that. they'll point out on how unhealthily you are eating and actually make it about you rather than themselves.
Right.
But rather than actually pointing out, saying stop, I think what's better to do is actually educate them about what they're doing, how they're looking, and being positive about that. Because what happens is that when you're starting to look good, if you've lost a lot of weight and if you're feeling confident, because that kind of comes with that, then if somebody tells you to stop doing what's making you feel good, is difficult. But then you kind of get swayed into it becoming really, really bad, but you just don't realize it. So I think the first step is to actually help them become aware and educate them about how they're looking, what they're actually doing to your body, and allow them that time to kind of be. Because most people expect you to just change overnight.
Snap out of it, that sort of thing. What do you, we were talking a little...
Can I just quickly ask, is anorexia always about the way you look, or is it also about control?
It's more about control.
Okay.
It becomes later about the way you look, but it's a lot about control.
So the one thing you can control is yourself and the way you eat. So that's what you focus on.
Yeah, and that's why it kind of even overlaps with OCD because of that whole, because you kind of obsess about food all day long,
Right.
but you don't eat it. But
Interesting.
So for
Okay.
example, there are people from Monday who will start planning their week on how they'll skip lunch or what they'll do when
Wow, really?
everybody is planning a meal,
Okay.
or what can they be doing at that hour so nobody will come ask them about food.
Right.
So you're actually
To that extent.
So you're actually spending a lot of time thinking about food, but you're just not eating it.
Wow.
As opposed to others where people think that they don't like to think about food. They do.
So to just kind of also jump back to, something that Avanti and I were kind of rolling our eyes about when it comes to social media and the pressures of social media, we also very briefly talked about another kind of, I'd say, newer disorder that hasn't even been, put in the DSM book, for example, a manual rather, for instance. And could you repeat what that was, for instance?
Orthorexia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what is orthorexia?
So orthorexia is the extreme behavior of obsessing over just eating healthy food. So, as you know, today the trend is not so much about
Clean eating. Oh God, I hate that term. Yeah.
And in various
As if there's
ways,
unclean eating. Just come on.
So, but when it takes over, that's all that you're going to do. You're not going to waver from it. You'll stop your social commitments because of it. Your entire day kind of revolves around that. You make sure your house is like that. Even when you're having guests or people over, it's just about that. It kind of takes over. So I guess anything when done in an extreme manner is unhealthy. And this is... But today, because clean eating is popular and a fad,
On
it's not,
Instagram.
it's not looked down upon.
Sure.
People are like, oh, what a good thing. But actually, it's really unhealthy. Because the more... Sure, there's some foods that are better for our body than others, but that doesn't mean that you cut them out forever and you don't...
Right.
Your body still needs to be...
Correct.
It needs
sustenance,
variety, actually, in order to thrive. You need variety.
Yeah. Let's dive into the more...
But no, wait, I just want to understand, what kind of... does it take trauma, or does it take a certain... And I use the word trauma loosely, to make someone go down the route of an eating disorder or orthorexia?
So I would say it's not... Trauma can be one of the things, but I think it's a lot to do with just a lot. Peer pressure is one huge reason for it, because a lot of eating disorders, it can start at any age, right? But starting from your teens to your 20s to your 30s, it can be at any point. A lot of it is to do with people around you. A lot of it to do is what is expected out of you. A lot of it is also to do about acceptance in society, in your family, just in general about... And then kind of controlling that. A lot of it also has to do with how you've been raised and your family's perspective and outlook on that.
Yeah, so what are some examples that you've noticed with how families may influence a child's behavior or relationship with a potential eating disorder?
So I think in order to cause it, you mean?
Yeah, in order to cause it.
So I think a lot of times in general, like, in India still, thin people are considered more attractive. So if, say, a girl is chubby, it's not unheard of that the mother or the father or other aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever, will start pressurizing the child about working out, eat healthy, stopping them from eating a lot of things. And when you're a child, you don't recognize that. So when you stop them from eating something, you'll want to eat it more. Till a point that from one end of the spectrum, you bounce to the other.
Right.
And that's why when they start losing it, initially it's encouraged.
Right, I see. But then it sort of perpetuates into something much bigger later on.
And a lot of it is also to actually please the parents, because they feel that by doing that, then they're actually finally fitting in.
I know someone who went through a few years when she was anorexic, and this might sound a bit like a half story because I don't know all the details. But from what I understand, she was never overweight, but she was slightly a little softer, softer than her like siblings and cousins and stuff like that. But that it was never emphasized in the family or brought up, or she wasn't teased or anything. But then her parents went through a divorce, and from what I gathered, she felt completely like things were out of her control in many ways. And she started fixating on maybe the one thing that she could control, which is herself.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot with your clients?
Quite common. It's very, very common, because one thing which is easy to control is food. Other parts of our life we can't really control as much. Say your academics or your work, it's not fully in our control. It kind of depends on other aspects too. But food, definitely. And that's one thing that you find pleasure in. In a way, if you think about it, it's self-harm, right? The same way people cut themselves to, it's another way
you
of
deprive yourself of something.
Yeah, and then you feel, once you actually are able to do it, you feel really good about yourself. And actually it gives you the confidence initially. But eventually, as your body is not getting the nutrition that it needs, you actually do get depressed, because the chemicals in your body, obviously get imbalanced. And so does other parts of your body too.
I'm just trying to think, could you give us maybe an example of, say, an instance that, maybe even you think of, like, growing up, things that you noticed around you, like like be it, someone in school who might have been dealing with something or the other. Like, I think we briefly touched upon an anecdote like this. Do you think you can expand a little bit more on something like this?
So I think it's like when you're in school and when there are people being able to do lots of different activities, or they're able to just, are able to fit in ways that you think you can't, although to everybody else you fit in perfectly. But if in your mind you haven't, and if you feel you want to find comfort in one thing, something that you're unable to speak to about anybody because you don't know how to, like how to phrase that in words. And I think it's quite common then to use that in food.
Right.
Because when you're young, that's one way of, or actually any point in life, that's one way where how you socialize, you meet people,
Correct.
And I think when you start focusing on food and you start reducing it, it becomes an aspect that you want to control, and that's one thing that's yours.
Right. So what would you say are some of the harsher things that you've noticed that some people might have said to, say, clients of yours or whatnot, that probably fueled that fire or made them feel worse about the fact that they were dealing with an eating disorder?
It's quite often that people say, you're sick, something's wrong with you.
Right.
For especially somebody who's young, or any person really, if you just go up to them and say that there's mentally something wrong with you, that's not going to be taken very well.
Right.
You look like you could faint at any point. Has anybody told you how ugly you look?
Oh, wow. People have actually said stuff like that, huh?
Yeah.
Oof, that's heavy.
Have you ever seen your body and realized how skin and bones you are? People can be really harsh to the point of saying, don't you see the influence that you will have on others? When actually what the person is doing is for themselves.
Right.
It's nothing to do about anybody else.
Wow. I remember growing up, I think there was a school counselor that we had when I was in school. And there was someone that I knew who was dealing with something at that point in time. And essentially this counselor just sort of blamed them for the issue and said, you know what, you're kind of starting a trend with the other younger girls in school and making them feel like they should start being, having an eating disorder like anorexia or whatever it was this person was dealing with at the time. And basically said something along the lines, if you do not eat now, you are going to die. Which is, I don't know, it's such a horrible...
Not very helpful.
No, it's not.
It's not helpful at all.
Blaming you and just saying you're going to die. Like, okay, how does this help me right now? It just makes me feel worse, I suppose.
No, and also another common thing which is often said is, and even parents say this, or teachers or therapists, is just like they're doing this for attention.
Right.
And a lot of times, what I ask them is, have you ever thought about why they want that attention?
Exactly.
Sure, it may start off as something with attention, but then it kind of goes off track.
Right.
But have you ever thought about
why they're not getting the attention that they want in the first place?
Right. And one thing I want to ask, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this is also how media has portrayed it in a big way. It seems to be, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that statistically, it's more women who have eating disorders as opposed to men. Is that true or not? And what would you say is a more accurate statement?
So it's common in women, but men are quite close to it, actually.
Right.
Because even for men, like we were just discussing about women, about how you have to, fit a role and look a certain way, it's the same thing for men also. And actually food is just considered that something with men that they will eat, and it's something that doesn't bother them.
Right.
But actually the way control, the way you look, acceptance, all of these things are the same for both genders.
Right. And
it's not common today, for example, when I meet teenagers or, people in their early 20s who are, I don't even know if they've hit puberty yet, but they're skinny, and they will tell me about how fat their stomach is, and these are guys. And in my head, I'm just like, where? I can't even see it.
Right.
But they're feeling it because somebody has passed, or they're just, a lot of times also what happens with boys is because women hit puberty quicker than them. So girls start maturing, but they don't. And so their bodies are not increasing. So that's another control manner that they start to play around with food. And then it takes control.
Do you feel that the male clients that you might have who are dealing with an eating disorder, they sort of approach or feel differently about their eating disorder than, say, your female clients? Is there something that... basically what I'm trying to get at is, do gender roles in some way play some sort of role?
They are slightly... I think starting with just the aspect of acceptance, I think it's very different when it's looked at by both genders. I think for women, because it's spoken a lot more about, so you're trying to fit in from what is told to you by society, while for men, you're trying to create your own. Because you're supposed to be your man and you're supposed to be your person.
Right.
So it's kind of, if you get what I'm trying to say, it works on two different ways. Also the way, for men, a lot of times it's not as much about, it's when they start, say, restricting food is often a symptom of them dealing with a problem.
Okay.
But a lot of times for them, it's actually when they start eating a lot more to become a lot more masculine. And that's a problem.
Right.
Because in doing that, they become really, really unhealthy.
Right, I see.
And they start pumping all sorts of things. And so it goes that sort of a disorder.
And would you say that, generally speaking, what are the sort of trends that or patterns that you've seen today, and what do you feel, generally speaking, needs to be addressed when it comes to this particular area of disorders, eating disorders?
I think the first thing that has to be talking about balance. I think rather than clean eating or unhealthy eating, I think the first thing that we have to discuss is about balanced eating, because nobody looks at that.
Yeah.
Right now people are talking about curvy is good or thin is good or all of that, but I think
I'm rolling my eyes. I'm just like, I hate this. I hate this. It really triggers me. So I have to calm down. Anyway.
But I think it's about more talking about balance, and I think actually starting that in school, actually educating children about what that balance means, because that means different things to different people. Some people can just genetically eat a lot more junk food and whatever and be fine, while some others can't, and it's helping them accept that.
Sure.
Helping them also find out other ways of releasing their ways of control. Helping them figure out what actually acceptance means to them. A lot of these areas which you use food for.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, what is an eating disorder? You use it for something and then it kind of goes out of hand and then just becomes about your body, looks and weight.
Right.
But it always starts off with something very, very different. It starts off with you finding solace in yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
So helping people figure that out. It's just an outlet. I think food is an outlet to help you.
It feels like that is the most, that's the common ground with virtually everything, finding some sort of solace within yourself, whatever the issue might be, whether it's an addiction, whether it's say like in the context an eating disorder, there's always this lack of acceptance
Yeah.
of self, or like resistance. Something's got to change. Something's got to give. I don't like this, or I want that instead. It always seems to be that. I just want to kind of finish off this particular episode with. I kind of want to just get your your personal views on the influence of social media, because I know it's very clear what Avanti's and my opinions are on this. But what do you think is, and I'm pretty sure this definitely affects, you know, younger kids, like adolescents and things like that. This whole hashtag self-care culture, which is total bullshit in my opinion. What, and I have a feeling you agree as well because you're smiling, but the thing is that what is, let me put it this way. If a young person came to you and they seemed, just at the outset, they seemed, you know, reasonably healthy physically, but they still felt that something was wrong and they were sliding down the slippery slope of having an eating disorder, what would be the thing that, either as a therapist or as a person who is showing them some sort of compassion, what would you even say at that point in time?
I think even, you know, sometimes, like, sorry, slightly digressing from this, even sometimes from the aspect of control or just an aspect of release, if I were to use that word. Like, for example, I know people who've thrown up, not from the aspect of bulimia, but just that just helps them feel better, feel more in control, doesn't make them feel as whatever they're feeling at that moment. And I think when they come, it's quite common for them to come and talk about social media and talk about what they've seen their friends doing and what they've seen the world doing, and all your influencers all over, you know, the world.
And the fear of missing out.
And the fear of missing out, and how beautiful everything seems, when although on an intellectual level, many of them will know that's not the case.
Right.
But on an emotional level, that's what's being targeted, right?
Yeah, right.
So when they don't get the likes or when they don't get something, it actually affects them. So actually now, one of the first questions I actually ask them is, what's your screen time? And one of the first things I do with my clients is, okay, let's try reducing that.
Right.
Because however strong-willed somebody is, if you're watching something like that for that many hours, it's going to have an influence on you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a therapist, and it impacts me as well. And
Correct.
it makes me question myself on many levels, many times as well. And I think social media obviously has its perks and its pros, but it comes with a lot of cons also.
Yep.
And this is something that we have to figure out on how to deal with, because especially in teenagers, in young adults, where they're still trying to figure themselves, they're still trying to figure out who they are, the influence a lot of times is negative.
Right. You know, it's funny you mentioned this, because there's a particular behavior of mine that I'm very aware of, but I still haven't been able to, well, to a degree I've been able to control it. In that, control.
You're questioning whether it's a good thing now. Yeah.
Wrong word. Okay. I've been able to let go of it a little bit, but I have noticed this, where if I do find myself more in a place of self-loathing or self-doubt as compared to times when I find myself less in that space. When I find myself more in that space, I'm checking my phone very often. And that doesn't necessarily mean social media. I'm just like, have I got a message yet? Have I got a like yet? Have I got a notification yet? Has this person replied to me on this dating app yet? Or this or that? And
because we become insecure, right?
Exactly.
And today our phones are our security.
yeah. And we're just craving that attention, you know. That's what I'm doing. Like, even if I'm working and I worked for 10 minutes, yeah, okay, cool. I give myself a minute break. Have I gotten any notifications on social media or whatever? And as I'm doing it, I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But my body is still saying, check it. So it's a very...
Because we're waiting for that high
Yeah.
that we get.
And just validation as, you know,
Exactly.
people. And if you think about it, most of us, first thing we do in the morning is see our phone.
Yep.
Last thing at night is our phone.
Our phone, yeah.
You know, people on birthdays really get upset if they don't get the number of wishes or likes or comments that they
Dude,
don't.
I felt that. I was like, hey, this person didn't send me a thing on their birthday or my birthday. Or like, if I wrote someone like happy birthday on their wall, there'll be something at the back of my mind going, hey, that person didn't like my comment. What the hell? Like, it's so silly. But a lot of people think about these sort of things as small and trivial as they may be, you know?
But I think today a lot of people are talking about it, but they're not doing anything about it. Everybody is aware of it, but you're still doing it.
Right.
And I mean, and the way it's moving forward, I don't see it getting better anytime soon.
Okay. And on that note, actually, before we end, I wanted to talk about something, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And it's the sort of how social media is very reductive. Well, we already touched upon that, But when it comes to yoga, for example, right? Yoga is so much more than asanas.
Yeah.
And it's so much more than the body. But this focus, this hyper focus on the body. And now you see this, yoga has been it's become gimmicky. I don't know if you've seen and everything.
Plenty,
yeah, exactly. It's like everything is about trying to bend your body as much as you can in that, one moment and whatever. And oh God, in the fucking yoga tights and I can't, I get it. We all do it. But what is with this fixation on the body? And I feel like it speaks to a much larger trend of there's so much chaos going on that it's it's the only thing we can really focus on. I mean, the only thing we can control is our bodies.
Yeah.
So let's make them something.
And the media has just always done that, right? There's over the decades, we've always had these posters of this is what a man should look like. This is what a woman should look like. So we've been brought up thinking, okay, I am not attractive if I don't look like this, as opposed to literal physical appearance. We're not focusing on whether a person is healthy or not. And when it comes to body image, for instance, say if you have a client that is dealing, ED might be a part of it, but they're very heavily focused on
looking a certain way.
How would you then approach that client and say, what, basically just to kind of move them away from this obsession with looking a certain way?
So I think first it's to help them understand what they actually want to look like, because a lot of times they say we don't like how we look, but if you ask them what do you want to actually look like, they don't really have an answer. They'll normally go back and say we'll come back next week to you and let you know.
Oh,
so it's not something that they
have
in mind. Even a body type, if you ask them, they'll actually say, maybe a UK 8 or 10 is fine. And I'm like, is it? And then they're like, no, maybe. And I'm just like, why don't you think about it?
Right.
And then when they come with whatever they come with, then you help them see how some of it maybe is realistic and practical and some of it is just not. Because say if you're petite, you are petite. You're not going to be tall with broad shoulders and long legs because sadly you've just not gotten the genes of it. And you have to help them accept that. Yeah. And that's the same way with people say who are broad and think they just don't like that. And that's something that they have to accept that as well. Same thing is with even parts of your face or just in general how your body shape is. Because a lot of it is to first help them realize what they are and what they can actually achieve.
Right.
And once that's clear, then the whole aspect of body image is a lot clearer.
Right.
Because I think at the end of the day, most of us, I think there are very few people who would be 100% content with how they look. I think there is always, some scope of improvement or feeling that, we can do more.
Right.
And I think that's all right. As long as that's not taking over your life or that's, stopping you from doing a lot of different types of things.
I think I'll just finish off this episode by just kind of rounding off pretty much exactly what you said, where when I had a recent session with my therapist and this constant narrative of, I'm not good enough always comes up for me. And she asked me a very simple question, which was so simple that I never really thought of it. But so at the same time, I didn't have an answer. And she was like, okay, so what is good enough? And I was like, I need to think about that one. And I think, you know what? That is the simple question that it's fair to ask yourselves, because that kind of allowed me to sort of shift my perspective. And I think this is a good point to call it an episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you, Ishita, for being on board. I'm Zain.
I'm Avanti.
And we'll see you guys next time on Marbles Lost and Found. See ya.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you enjoy listening to content on the IVM Podcast Network, let me tell you about a couple of things that you should check out this week. On paperback, host Satyajit Roy and Rachita Sharma are joined by the writer and creative editor Himali Kothari. She discusses the process of meticulously writing and rewriting a story. On Keeping It Queer, Farhad and Naveen talk to queer mental health professional Richa Vashishta. On the Filter Coffee podcast, host Karthik Nagarajan is joined by comedian, writer and columnist Ashish Shakya. They discuss the evolution of the Indian comedy scene and the onslaught of comedic content online. On Marvel's Lost and Found, Avanti and Zain talk to therapist Ishita Pateria about eating disorders and how to deal with them. On What a Player, Mikhail Almeida is joined by comedian Joel D'Souza to discuss cricket, football, Formula One, and of course, darts. Thanks, and we hope to see you again soon.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, a show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.